The Pacers have pulled off yet another impossible comeback win, this time on the NBA's biggest stage against the NBA's best team. So what was it that put them in a hole to begin with, and how did they climb out of it to steal Game 1? For the first time in these playoffs, OKC went away from the double big lineup and moved Chet to the 5. And this gives them the option to cross-match everything. Instead of trying to get the correct matchups while the Pacers push, whoever's closest to each player is just going to take that assignment, which is made possible by their historic personnel. As Halliburton dribbles down the court, Shea's the closest defender, so he's going to turn to stop the ball. Then you end up with Joe on Siakam, and he's going to aggressively front the post while Caruso stays close enough to deny the touch. Then from there, everyone else fills out to not leave anyone open. In addition to the cross matches, they switched everything to perfection. When Halliburton gets around Shea, Dort immediately picks him up on a peel switch, and that leaves Shea on Siakam, who's going to look to post up, so they scram switch to get iHeart on him, and just like that, the offense resets with no advantage. The only guys who weren't going to switch onto the ball were OKC's bigs. If Chet got put in action, he was looking to play the ball in drop coverage before recovering to his man on a pop. This entire strategy was all about eliminating dribble penetration. J-Dub's the closest to the ball, so he picks up. Then when they go to an empty side pick and roll, Chet drops back to protect the paint, forcing Halliburton into a tough floater. Taking away dribble penetration is also why they aggressively switched everything between their wings. When Siakam uses a screen, Shea jumps out to the ball. Then when it's handed off to Halliburton, he holds his position at the point of attack. Siakam versus Wallace isn't a mismatch on the perimeter, especially with all of OKC's aggressive help. It felt like the only way they'd be able to get a paint touch is if they got Chet to defend on the three-point line. And this time they're able to do that with a flare screen, forcing Chet to close on a shooter. In the event that Chet found himself in space, that's when the Thunder would send the low man over to the big, then have the initial defender fill in for the corner, again completely taking away any numbers advantage. When Toppin checked in, OKC switched up their approach though. Now instead of getting into the action, they're going to have Chet pre-switch so that he can stay on the baseline as a roamer. That of course creates a mismatch in the post, and not only does Wallace front the pass while J-Dub gets ready to help, as soon as the ball gets to the corner and Toppin drives, Chet and Wallace are going to peel switch to perfection, and just like that, the offense is out of options. The Pacers had a counter for this though. Turner's going to start at the top of the key, lifting Chet, while Toppin runs from corner to corner with no other defender close enough to pull off a pre-switch. Now you're able to get Chet back in that drop coverage, and Turner ends up with a great look from 3, although he isn't able to hit. All that's to say, Chet was going to be in the action if Indiana wanted him to be. Like I said, they had him dropping back, but I should also mention that if the big was rolling to the side of a spotted up wing, they'd come with aggressive help to take away the middle of the floor. It was the exact same thing against perimeter isolations. Siakam looks to play one-on-one, and J-Dub forces him to the middle, where Wallace is waiting to help at the nail. He's able to take away a drive, while still getting back to contest a 3. This aggressive help further unlocks the ability to switch everything. Caruso is able to pretty easily cut off Siakam's drive. Then when they set up a handoff, he jumps out to pick up TJ. The ball gets to Mathurin, who's able to get around Wiggins, only for Caruso and iHeart to swarm him at the rim. The only real downside to all of this switching is that if Siakam finds a way to get the ball in the post, pretty much every one of those wings is a mismatch for him. Of course, they're looking to deny the pass, but the Pacers not only space the floor better than any team in the league, Siakam's a guy who can do his damage from as far as 16 feet out, because for him, post-up scoring is less about power and more about the ability to turn and shoot. When Thomas Bryant checked in though, that's when OKC went to a zone. Caruso was the guy in the middle, so he's the one picking up any attempt at dribble penetration. Then because of that switchability, every action's just getting handed off to the next wing defender, and Indiana's essentially forced to live on the three-point line. It's unbelievable how well they rotated out of this zone. Siakam sets up on the block, so iHeart picks him up while Caruso drops to take position in the middle, where he not only takes away a pass to Bryant, he steps over to take away a baseline drive. Indiana's counter was to simply go small. They took Bryant out, went with the front court of Siakam and Toppin, and that way they had a little bit more offensive skill on the floor to attack the aggressive paint defense. Then OKC countered by going even smaller. They put Kenrich Williams at the 5 in this sort of death lineup, and if you thought they were a fast, aggressive, switchable defense before, now we're talking about a unit that took these qualities to an entirely different level. And with that, the first quarter's over. The Pacers turned the ball over 9 times, scored just 20 points, and found themselves down by 9. It was clear that the Pacers had to find a way to create any sort of advantages going towards the basket. And typically, they're a team that wants to run 3 or 4 actions in the same possession to create an opening. On this one, it starts with a dribble handoff, which iHeart plays in a drop. Then it turns into a guard-to-guard ball screen, which Caruso goes right under. Still no advantage, so the third attempt is a spread pick and roll between TJ and Siakam, which again leads to nothing and results in a contested 3 at the end of the clock. If they're not running multiple actions, chances are they're looking to exploit even the slightest mismatch. With all of that switching, you'll occasionally find a wing on a big, and even if they're able to get that low post touch, Chet's immediately coming over from the baseline to help, as they again just wouldn't let the Pacers near the basket. Speaking of Chet, although he's looking to drop against pick and roll, if needed, they could have him switch onto the ball. Of course, that's when the Pacers are either looking to isolate from the perimeter or get Turner a post touch. The only problem is that they could not get the ball through any gaps in OKC's defense. It became apparent pretty quickly that post-ups for Turner weren't really going to be a counter, as wings consistently fought and won the battle for position. And for that reason, the Thunder were comfortable going back to that small lineup, this time with J-Dub at the 5. Remember what I said about multiple actions. First, you're going to see Halliburton run off a couple pin downs, to which Caruso just switches, then Mathurin's going to try to isolate Wallace, gets immediately bottled up, and so the Pacers reset for an empty side pick and roll between Halliburton and Siakam. Dort stays glued to the ball while J-Dub stays glued to the pop, and with no advantage, the result is a smothered long 2 that eventually leads to a shot clock violation. Also, I want you to keep in mind that throughout this entire stretch, the Pacers still weren't getting anything in the open floor. Between the cross-matching, some aggressive ball pressure, and occasionally even a trap, Indiana looked as uncomfortable as I've ever seen them. And it was around this 3-minute mark in the second quarter when the turnovers really started to pile up for them. They're a team that wants to play fast. In the first half, it felt like they were rushed, and they were playing fast, but it was on OKC's terms as they were the ones dictating the pace. That was one of the few reasons why they only put up 45 points in the first half, despite shooting 42% from 3. And it was the main reason why they turned the ball over 19 times, which is the most by any team in one half of a playoff game since they started tracking it back in 1997. Still though, because they showed up defensively, they were only down 12 at the half, which we all know too well is more than doable for this Pacers team. To start the third, Indiana had a predicament. They needed to find a way to create advantages without putting themselves at risk of turning the ball over. And the way they did that was pretty opposite of what they typically like to do, running less action. They simplified the offense, going to one quick action and looking for the first opportunity to get a decent shot up. Typically that meant a high ball screen between Halliburton and Turner. This time Chet's gonna switch, and of course they're looking to post up Turner, but instead of moving the ball around to find an entry, they want him making that pass. Nothing was forced though. Here's another one where Chet switches, and instead of hunting for an entry pass to Turner, they just swing the ball around the perimeter. Right here is typically where Nesmith would look to make the entry, and they'd rather him get up a semi-contested 3. It's hard to overstate the value of just simply getting a shot attempt up. Here's one where they pre-switch to keep Chet on the baseline, and instead of looking for every way to pull him into the action, they stick with getting Siakam a switch onto a smaller wing. Again, there's no forced entry though. Take what the defense is giving you, and if you're able to touch the paint, you know Chet's going to be helping from the baseline, which is how you'll start to get some quality corner 3s, or potentially putbacks. By utilizing one action and going quick, the Pacers were able to get some of their transition offense back. Early ball screens are a staple for them, and Halliburton really started to find his groove. It's the same thing when Nembhard initiates. Turner sets a high ball screen, Chet's back and drop, and he turns the corner to attack open space on a drive. You'll notice that on these plays, they're making a deliberate effort to empty the opposite wing. This not only leaves Halliburton with more room to attack the middle of the floor off of screens, it creates space on an empty side to get into some off-ball action, such as on this play. The handoff up top is actually a decoy to clear the top of the key for Mathurin to come off a down screen and attack the paint, where he draws help and drops it off to Bryant for a big-time dunk. This time around, they were playing fast on their own terms. Like I said, instead of trying to force paint touches, they accepted OKC's defensive brilliance and looked for any quick shot. Then it essentially becomes a shootout, and luckily for the Pacers, they were hitting their shots. Over the entire game, they shot 18 of 39, or 46% from 3, which was pretty easily their biggest advantage. For all of the simplifying and shot making though, more than anything, it was about good decisions. Caruso and Shea mess up a pre-switch, and TJ wastes no time skipping it to Siakam in the corner. That takes us to the end of the third. The Pacers are still down 9, but they figured some things out and put up 31 points. And as we all know, if this Pacers team is within single digits entering the fourth, good luck closing out the game. OKC tried to make them uncomfortable by upping their pressure to 94 feet. But the Pacers have a ton of different ball handlers, and they'll counter by starting their actions from as far out as half court. This time it's an empty side pick and roll, and Mathurin has space to get to the rim. Next time down, their one action is actually going to be a flare screen for Siakam to catch the ball with space to attack baseline. He's unable to convert on an awkward floater, then Mathurin's unable to take advantage of a second chance, but the point is that they're getting layups. One thing to keep in mind is that they're constantly mixing up the actions. First it was a pick and roll, then it was a flare, now it's going to be double drag. OKC completely bottles it up, only for Nembhard to win the one-on-one battle with Caruso on his way to 2 points plus a foul. Nembhard was at the center of everything in the fourth. This time they go to an early give and go for him to build ahead of steam, and once he touches the paint, the entire defense collapses, so he's got multiple options and Indiana's got multiple shooters. This next play starts with Toppin bringing the ball up, and it looks like they might get into some off-ball action, but it actually just turns into a spread pick and roll. If we pause right here, you'll notice that a pass to Toppin is probably available. Remember though, that's when OKC starts rotating, jumping lanes, forcing turnovers, and by hitting Turner for a quick trigger from 3, you avoid all of it. I want to be clear in saying that I don't think OKC's defense looked any worse than it did in the first half. They went to the same tactics, had the same execution. The difference was that the Pacers accepted that they weren't going to be able to break it down through isolation, post-up play, or multiple actions. They simplified their approach, looked for other avenues, and couldn't miss a shot. Then when Turner hit this sidestep 3, all of a sudden we were looking at a 4-point game. Like I mentioned earlier though, the bulk of Indiana's offense came from those high ball screens with the initiator going towards an empty wing. Without nail help, Chet has to play the ball and drop, then Turner's got room to step into a jumper. Another key difference in this second half was that it felt like Haliburton was a lot more aggressive attacking those cross matches. When Shea picks up the ball, he wastes no time getting into an attack, which again gets some of that transition offense going. Even in the half court though, they looked for Shea on switches quite a few times. Notice how they stacked the weak side to keep that empty wing look so that there's no nail help. And when Caruso steps up from the baseline, that leaves nobody to keep Siakam off the glass. With that said though, they still couldn't really cut into the lead. After a couple of free throws from Shea, it was a 9-point game with less than 3 minutes to go. This is the point where both teams have shown their cards, and it's just going to come down to execution. And it also happens to be the point where the Pacers turn the game sliders up to 100. You've got Andrew Nembhard isolating Shea from the top of the key and hitting prime James Harden combos to get to a step back 3. Just insane stuff. Down the stretch though, I'd say their late game execution was more about the way they defended, or maybe even OKC's complete lack of offense. After letting Shea play in space for most of the game, they decided to start selling out to make anybody else beat them. That means hedging against ball screens to get it out of his hands, and letting it get to a guy like Dort who'd been hot throughout the game, but can't capitalize on this one. That defense goes both ways though, because while we're talking about Dort, I should probably mention his otherworldly vertical contest on Nesmith at the rim, which then turned into transition offense going the other way, with a tough finish from Shea putting them back up by 5. Still though, the Thunder could not score in the half court. You're going to see Haliburton jump out in an early hedge to not let Shea turn the corner, and even when he does find his way to the paint, Siakam's waiting under the basket to contest. This time they're going to clear out for a top of the key isolation, and when Shea works his way inside the arc, Nesmith comes with aggressive nail help to make him think twice. Then J-Dub has to create with the shot clock running down, and this play encapsulates the struggles he had all night long. To create more space for Shea, instead of isolating from up top, they start him more on the wing while emptying the middle. He uses that space to get near the paint, and he actually creates a great look, but it misses. We all know what happens next. No timeout, Haliburton pushing in transition, one action, one shot, ball game. The Pacers led for 0.3 of a second in game 1, and they walked out of OKC with home court advantage. This really was a tale of two games for Indiana. After turning the ball over 19 times in the first half, they only turned it over 5 times in the second half while grabbing 9 offensive rebounds, so they actually won the possession game. The difference is even more extreme if we look at their offensive rating by quarter though. For reference, they had a 119 offensive rating in the 16 games leading up to the finals. In the first half of game 1, they had an offensive rating of just 83.3. In the second half, they had a scorching 137.5 offensive rating as they just torched OKC with their shot making. It's easy to say that they won't get this hot from 3 again, but that's exactly what they've done all playoffs. There's something to be said about the value of just simplifying your approach. OKC's set defense is nearly impossible to break, but by taking what they're giving you, playing deliberate, and not forcing any decisions, they were able to get back to their own pace and ride the coattails of their shot making to yet another comeback win. As far as game 2 goes, we'll have to see if OKC has some counters up their sleeve for this second half offense. More importantly though, we'll have to see if they have some offensive adjustments to get anybody outside of Shea going. Because when they forced 19 first half turnovers and held the Pacers to 45 points, the game should not have been within reach. Either one of J-Dub or Chet is going to have to perform like an all-star alongside Shea if they're going to win game 2, and if they're going to gain an advantage in the series. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think's going to happen in this series. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.